It is actually baffling to me how like because like I've heard so many stories of dogs that are like I've heard a story of a dog that like after his owner was taken to a hospital like 16 blocks away,
Yeah.
just like he escaped and then went to the hospital and just like found. I'm like, how like I get
Totally,
it.
that's
You're in those.
amazing.
Yeah, it is incredible. We human beings do not deserve dogs. Are you okay? Like, are you open if I also do this live into the group, just kind of like as that as well? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
Hell
whatever you
yeah.
want. I'm used to being on video. I'm on video all the time.
Cool. Yeah, I go live into my Facebook group every single day.
Good for
Mhm.
you. I
Whether
have gotten really bad about it.
whether or not it's like because and people always ask like how do you do that, how do you have time? I'm like, you can just go in for like 5 minutes and be like, this thing that I saw on Instagram that really pissed me off, here's why. Take like 5 minutes. Um, no, I don't want to go live into grandma's favorite recipes, though that would be hilarious. Um, dang. Hey, there we go. You're live. I like it when it
All
says. I
right.
like it when it says that. Now I always have to make sure because like a few weeks ago I tried going live and Facebook turned my live down because I was wearing a shirt that I guess looked too much like the background. And it was like, Chris, you're naked. You can't be on live. And I was like, no, I promise you I'm fully clothed.
Yeah, this is that is not my business.
Oh God, it's playing back the audio. Stop. There we go. Cool. All right. So then we're off to a great start. Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, traditional standard podcast live training stuff. From the moment you were born to this moment today, right now, who are you? Why should people listen to you? What are we talking about?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll get Reader's Digest version, but feel free to ask me more questions.
For sure.
So I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Only child, single parent. Mom was an alcoholic. And so there was a lot of trauma growing up, a lot of mental health stuff going on. And so, how I kind of originally got into the health and wellness space was fitness because working out literally changed my life. I was able to get off all my medications that I was on for a decade for anxiety and depression. And it just and helped me like stay off of them. And I fell in love with it. So I got certified as a personal trainer, and fell in love with that and spent my time as a personal trainer and then group instructor and then gym management and running other companies like fitness-based companies for other people, before obviously getting into my own space. But a couple years after I started doing the personal training stuff, I was in a car accident and not a bad car accident, like nothing crazy, but it set off this like cascade of events of chronic back pain that then turned into chronic hip pain. And I no longer had feeling in my right leg for many, many months. Then that turned into chronic pain in my leg for many, many months after that. Had a gut issues. And then I was just tired all the time. And then sleep got really wonky for a long time and energy levels dipped. And I started gaining weight, even though like nutrition didn't change and Western medicine really failed me, in all of those aspects. And when I started to turn to functional medicine, even that really failed me for a long time. And I would get a little bit better and then not really. And I'd get like temporary relief, but I was also on like 20 million supplements. And then I was on restrictive diets for years and years and years. And I couldn't eat anything. And I still had largely most of my own symptoms. So I was like, well, I'm going to go and learn all this stuff myself and figure this out. And it turns out I had early stage autoimmunity and chronic SIBO and heavy metal toxicity and parasite overload and chronic Epstein-Barr virus. And then the trauma played a big role. So for me, it was about like learning these pieces, and I learned them one at a time, and slowly kind of put them all together into healing myself, and then translated that into helping other people. So I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, I'm a functional blood chemistry specialist, and I'm trained in many of the functional labs, although I only run a handful because I only see value in a handful of them. I am a certified personal personal trainer, obviously, still. And then I do energy healing. And so it's really combining the body inside and outside of the body, and nervous system regulation work and trauma work and chronic stress work to prioritize the body holistically, truly holistically, inside and out, to provide optimal healing, so we can be the best version of ourselves.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and that's it. That's how I got here to what I do today.
um when you said kind of like just all, it sounds like maybe a lot of these little underlying issues were slowly starting to build on themselves, and then like it sounds like when you kind of had that accident, that kind of acute onset of stress was like that last little bit of thing to start tipping the dominoes to just like one thing after another to another. um what was that, what was that process like from a mental standpoint? Because you said like working out saved your life, so like obviously you're like into fitness at this point. You're probably feeling like a rock star, everything's going well, but then suddenly to go from one extreme of like, hey, I feel awesome, to hey, now nothing feels good at all. What was like go from one extreme to the other? Like what was that like type from a mental process? Like how did that go for you, and like, and how did you kind of work your way out of that?
Yeah, it was really tough. I mean, I was preparing for my first bodybuilding competition, going to this accident. So I mean, in the gym all the time, like tracking macro. I mean, like the best shape of my life. And then all of a sudden, every doctor said, okay, well, you can't work out anymore. Like you shouldn't move. And I couldn't stand for more than about 10 minutes, at that time. And so it took a huge toll on my mental health. And, I was on these restrictive diets. And, my main coping mechanism at the time was alcohol. And so, I turned to that for a little bit, but then I had to really cut that out because it made me feel so terrible. And it was a little dark there for sure for a little bit. And good for my now husband for sticking with me for that time, because we were pretty early stage dating, around the time I got into that accident. And yeah, I mean, it was just really tough. I mean, I was just in pain all the time. And if anyone's experienced chronic pain, I mean, that alone is so physically and emotionally exhausting. And people, you don't want to talk about it after a certain point, because you're just like, oh, this is just my life all the time. And people are tired of hearing about it and you don't want to talk about it. And people just don't know what to do for you. And they're like, have you tried stretching? I'm like, get out
I,
of here.
I promise you that was the first thing I tried.
Yeah, I've been to 9 physical therapists. Yeah, I've tried stretching. I've tried all the things in my back, burning off nerves and getting all kinds of injections done. Like I promise I've tried all the things. So yeah, I mean, it was pretty dark there for a little bit. Along with the chronic fatigue and the gaining weight and all the gut stuff, which impacts your mental health, as well. And it was a really slow climb kind of out of that. But I'm thankful now. I'm thankful kind of looking back and experiencing that. And I continue to do a lot of trauma work and nervous system regulation work on myself and obviously with others. But it's one of the most valuable things, that I would ever do. And if there's only like one health thing I could ever do, it would be nervous system regulation work, which for me is a lot based in meditation, meditation and kind of energy work for myself, because it's game changing. I mean, that's how I start my day. That's how I end my day. It impacts my sleep and my mood. And I mean, it just impacts everything.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's funny because like when I a lot of the times when I take on new clients, a lot of it comes like I usually start with the breath. I think the breath is the center of everything we ever do. All movement starts in the breath, which then branches out to the core and it kind of branches out all that sort of thing. But it's like if you can control your breath, you have so much more control over your nervous system. And that I've had clients before just learn how to breathe properly and just do like 5 minutes of something as simple as box breathing, and you can physically see them unwinding. I've had a client, which was really awkward because this was early in my training career, because I didn't realize that it was going to be this impactful. But I had a client like just start bawling their eyes out in the middle of the floor on the gym, and I'm like,
Yeah.
but
what do I
because
do with this?
but because they finally, for the first time in years, were able to just relax for the first time. And then she messaged me the next day and was like, I just had the best sleep of my life. I'm like, the only thing I did was get you to breathe. But like, that's the power of just of the nervous system. And so like, I would love to actually expand on that a bit, and deep dive into that, because I think, again, getting control of the nervous system is going to be such a powerful tool for stress. We know stress is like, chronic stress is like responsible for more than, I think, I don't remember the exact statistics. I'm pretty sure it was around like the 90% of all chronic illnesses, sicknesses, diseases. Like, chronic stress leads to so many problems. So if we're talking about nervous system regulation to de-stress, where do you get people to start, and where do you think people should kind of go from there?
Yeah, I mean, we start really basic. I mean, and we usually pick from meditation, breath work, journaling. Doesn't really matter which one, but like pick one, do it for 5 minutes a day consistently for a couple weeks, and we can build on it from there. But it really starts with that. And different people respond to different things. For me, it's meditation, but meditation took me a while to get into, and I don't think it's right for everyone. I can just sit in silence and meditate. I'm good for an hour. But certainly that's not where I started. That's not where people should start. Guided meditations, I mean, guided breath work, just journaling at the end of the day. Like, what are you thinking about? Like, what's on your brain right now? And just get it out of your brain onto a piece of paper. All the things you did today, all the things that you're thinking about, all the things you have to do tomorrow, all the loops that your brain's going in. And then you can always add in, start with 5 minutes and then try like 8 to 10 minutes. And then you could do 15. And then, oh, let's add a second session. Like, let's do one in the morning and one in the evening. Like, let's see how that goes. Oh, let's add in 1 minute at lunch too, and just focus on breathing for literally 1 minute. And so I think it's just kind of a gradual scale from there. And, for us, like in our practice, that's where we start before we start to dive deeper into the trauma work. Because if you don't have the tools to bring you back into a state of true calm and peace, it gets really hard as you start to dive deeper into the trauma work, and things are going to come up and going to trigger you and going to dysregulate your nervous system. You need to have the tools and resources to help bring yourself back, kind of to equilibrium after that.
Got it. Yeah, journaling is huge, and one of the examples I always use is like, Abraham Lincoln had his hot list. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where it's like, he would literally just write out letters. All the angry, negative emotions that he was feeling would just like rage at people, and then he just wouldn't send the letters. But that was his way of kind of getting it out of him, because like, especially because we kind of get these ideas of bottling up negative emotions, which to me is always funny, because human beings are emotional creatures, and all emotions are meant to be felt. The problem is that we allow, and then we eventually come back to baseline. We eventually come back to that neutral feeling that like standard. And so we allow things like joy and happiness coming in, no problem. But because we like those, we're more open to them, which means that when they come in, we feel them, we're happy, cool. And then they eventually leave, we come back to baseline. But when negative emotions come in, they come in, and then we shut the door and we don't let them leave, because we're trying to hide it and hide it and hide it. And it's kind of like the same thing as trying to like get a beach ball and shove it underneath the ocean. And eventually you're just going to get too weak and tired. Your willpower is going to go, and you're just going to let it go, and it's going to explode in your face. Now you're super stressed. Now you're super emotional. And now, hey, look, pizza, cake,
Yeah.
ice cream, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's huge, because again, like, if somebody like Abraham Lincoln, who is a massive historical figure, Marcus Aurelius, who was arguably the most powerful human being that has ever existed on earth, he wrote nonstop in journals, like, how can I improve? How can I, like, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? And these are two of the most powerful people in human history. It's like, why are we so afraid to journal? I know it's this woo-woo thing that a lot of people like to shove down, but it's like, success leaves clues. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan. Letter writing is one of the big trauma tools that we use, and I mean I've recently shared on my social media. You know, my mother passed away a little over 3 years now, and then about a year and a half after that, like her brother, who was like the person I was closest to in my family, like he passed away. So a lot of grief and like my mom passed away in 2020, and obviously everything was going on there and it was in a different state, and so we didn't get to have like a true memorial service. So I mean, writing letters is so cathartic, and it's not, I mean, it just allows you to release. You can burn them, you can bury them, you can give them to water. I mean, there's just, I mean, it's such a great way to process and get these things out of your body so they don't become stuck and cause all kinds of dysfunction.
For sure. Um, I kind of want to like stick on that for just a little bit longer.
Mhm.
Practicality. Do you have any like prompts that you like to give people that they can then maybe use to dive deeper? Obviously, it could be different for each individual, so this could be a very general thing. And but do you have any kind of things like that you like to give clients or patients?
Yeah, so I really like to start with just like what I call a brain dump. It's just like whatever's on your brain at that moment, just get it onto a piece of paper and out of your brain. And that's just like write down what you're thinking about right now, write down any loops your brain's going to, you know, that conversation that you had today, write what happened, write what you would have wanted to happen, like all of these things that circulate in our brain. And then write down your to-do list for tomorrow, like what all do you have to do? And I think that's such an easy entry point into journaling. I'm also a big fan of getting a feeling wheel and just writing like, how are you feeling today? What are you feeling? Where is this feeling in your body? And then how does it make you physically feel? How does this emotion make you physically feel? And that's a great way to tune in not only to your emotions, but also your physical body. Because getting out trauma and getting out emotions, there's a lot of ways to do this. But the first step is being able to identify what are you actually feeling, because so many of us aren't taught how to feel feelings and how feelings can feel inside of our body. So just understanding what are you feeling and really like how does that feel inside your body? Like, do you feel it in your belly? Do you feel it in your heart? Do you feel it in your legs? Like, are you clenching your fist? Are you clenching your jaw? Like, where is this kind of coming out for you? Because that allows us to access different tools to release whatever that is.
100%. When you find people start picking up journaling, obviously this can be a very good like stress reliever. How do you see that impacting people on a day-to-day basis, like being able to relieve that stress? How do they start kind of feeling, and does that like knock over other dominoes that kind of lead to a better quality improvement of life? Like how does that kind of look for you? Like what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I would say number one is sleep. Like sleep automatically gets better. Just like they can fall asleep, they even if they wake up in the middle of the night, they can go back to sleep because their brain's not running on the loops, you know, which is often associated with anxiety. Well, where does anxiety really come from? Well, cortisol plays such a big role in this. So if we can get some of this stuff out of your brain, your sleep is automatically going to get better. You know, mood changes. Mood is huge. I mean, just like how you react to things or not reacting to things anymore and being able to respond and take a moment to be like, all right, well, how do I want to respond in this situation versus like automatically being on attack mode and just like automatically responding. Digestion. Digestion also automatically gets better. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm not as bloated, or like my bowel movements are better. My acid reflux isn't as intense. Like my belly just feels better. Or even like, I mean, hormones too also can play a really big role here. And they're just like, oh, you know, like going into my last cycle, you know, I didn't have as many cramps, or like I didn't have, you know, breast tenderness leading up for 2 weeks before the start of my cycle. All of these things, you know, can certainly, I mean, all of these things are so impacted by stress.
I love this is always where I start usually with clients is like sleep, like mental health, mindset, sleep, and stress management are usually the first things I go to tackle when I take on the clients. So like this is like one of my favorite conversations already.
Yeah. I'm so
That
glad.
this is exactly where I love to go. And we know that things like stress, like I said, plays a role in digestion. Obviously, that plays a role in like gut health. We know the gut is directly linked to like thyroid. We know this is all, you mentioned hormones. So kind of like, if you don't mind, like kind of like diving into those kind of three factors where it's like, how does stress impact gut health, which then we know can impact thyroid. We know that can impact like hormones, hunger hormones, which could lead to overeating if you're overstressed. Like we know all that kind of plays a role. So if you don't mind kind of like diving into those three factors, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Stop me. This is like my nerd hole of just like, oh, what I love to talk about. So like
Go,
stop me at any
go.
time. So I'm about to go on a rant here.
Hell yeah.
Okay. So when we think, I'm going to start with digestion because this is like the biggest cascade here and it branches out into hormones and the thyroid and everything else. So the first thing that happens when we think about digestion, so digestion starts in the brain. And if we're in a sympathetic or fight or flight stressed kind of state, we're not automatically right off the bat, we're not going to have great digestion because our body's not meant to digest food when we're stuck in a chronic state of stress. And if we think about like way back in the day, if we were being chased by a tiger, we're not going to like stop and hang out and like eat some berries to digest. So, like that's not going to be great for survival. So digestion shuts down. And so automatically like we're not in a great place. The next thing that happens is our stomach acid production. When we're super stressed, our stomach acid production automatically goes down, which impacts pathogens that can go into the rest of our body. It impacts our body's ability to break down food, specifically protein. And people who oftentimes will have an aversion to protein, this can be linked to stomach acid production, although there certainly can be other things, but this is a really big one. If you see pieces of food in your stool, a lot of times this is related to stomach acid production. And if we're not producing stomach acid properly, the rest of our digestive tract and the enzymes and digestive juices, like nothing's going to be in a great place. So that plays a really big role. Now, the other thing I'll say here as a side note is when we're really stressed, our adrenals are producing cortisol, and it could also be some other things, but cortisol is our main stress hormone. When our adrenals are consistently producing cortisol and we're under constant or chronic stress, our adrenals are doing a lot of work. And when they're doing a lot of work, they're going to pull a lot of nutrients that are also required to produce stomach acid production. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword where it's like the adrenals are pulling a bunch of nutrients and we probably don't have enough nutrients to produce enough stomach acid. Plus our body shuts down or limits stomach acid production right off the bat when we're in this chronic state of stress. So it's like a double-edged sword here where like our stomach acid production like really goes downhill. And this plays a really big role in controlling pathogens, bacteria, yeast, fungus, and parasites. This is why it's so common for anyone who has any of these conditions or any of these overgrowths to also have low stomach acid production, because this is a breeding ground when we have low stomach acid production for these pathogens to overgrow, to get in places that shouldn't be there, for all kinds of stuff like that. I'll also say, and I'll just kind of backtrack here just a little bit, when we're in a chronic state of stress, I'm going to guess for most of us, we're also going to eat fast. We're not chewing our food. We're just like swelling. We're trying to drink some water. We're just getting things down. And that also plays a really big role in our body's ability to break down food. And if we're not properly chewing our food, we've got large pieces of food going into our stomach that our stomach then has to break down to pass to the rest of our digestion. And if we are not chewing our food and then we have low stomach acid production, man, is that just a whole mess for our digestive tract. So that's like the biggest piece when it comes to these overgrowths, to any kind of stomach dysfunction, GERD, acid reflux issues. And most of acid reflux is actually a result of low stomach acid production. It can be very damaging to the stomach, and we can end up with things like gastritis. So that's how it really plays a big role here. Now, when it comes to hormones, and we're talking sex hormones here. So hormones are impacted by a couple really big things. So the first one is stress. Once again, if we think about if we're being like way back in the day, if we were being chased by a tiger, we're probably not in the best position to reproduce at this moment. We're not going to stop and focus on reproduction. Not the safest thing to do in that moment. And our body perceives that very similarly when we're going through periods of chronic stress. So hormones are probably going to be down regulated and we're not going to be producing enough, which obviously is an issue. We can end up with all kinds of imbalances. Now, the other thing that plays a really big role when it comes to hormones is filtering out excess hormones. Excess estrogen, progesterone, testosterone are obviously the big ones here. And this is why we can end up with estrogen dominance, testosterone dominance, things like PCOS, among other things. So if we're under chronic stress, we're probably going to have hormone imbalances. Now, the other thing with the liver is if we're chronically stressed, once again, we're producing more cortisol. That excess cortisol has to be filtered out by the liver. And if the liver is already doing a bunch of other things and trying to get all this excess cortisol, it may not have the time and capacity to filter out all the excess hormones. The other piece that goes into this, if we have the digestive issues, most pathogens are releasing toxins. We may also end up with excess toxins because of the low stomach acid, because the stomach acid kills a lot of these toxins and pathogens and things that shouldn't go out to the rest of our body. So now our body's overloaded by excess toxins, by pathogens who are releasing toxins, and now all of that has to be circulated through our liver to be filtered out, which once again, if our liver is doing all of this other stuff, well, we're probably not going to have the time and capacity to filter out all the excess sex hormones. So we end up with these imbalances. Now, I start with those because then we look at the thyroid. Now, thyroid, if we think about the thyroid, we have two main axes kind of in our brain. We have the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which the adrenals, stress, cortisol, plays a really big role here. If we're under chronic stress, that's doing a whole lot. But then we also have the hypothalamus pituitary thyroid axis, which those first two things are the same thing. So if we're under a lot of stress, our thyroid hormones, just the TSH, which is really the signal from the brain to the thyroid, that's probably going to be impacted. And that can really go either direction, trending high, trending low, trending weird, kind of all over the place. But then the thyroid itself produces T4, which is the main thyroid hormone. And that T4 cannot be used by the body. It has to be converted into T3 for the body to be able to be used. Now, that conversion process, well, about 60% of that conversion is done in the liver. If the liver is chronically stressed with all of these other things it's doing, it probably doesn't have time to do all of this conversion from T4 to T3. Now, another 20% of that is done in the gut. If we have got gut overgrowth, we got all kinds of dysfunction going on from chronic stress. Well, we're probably also not doing a great job converting it in the gut. So we can end up with thyroid dysfunction. Now, the immune system is also mostly housed in the gut. And if we've got pathogens, chronic toxin overload, if we happen to end up with like chronic viral issues because the immune system's trying to do all these other things because it's chronically stressed, well, we can end up with chronic viral issues that also has to be processed out through the liver. And the immune system just can't handle it, and it can end up hyper responding, in which case we can end up with autoimmunity, which is an immune response, and that can attack many, many things in the body. The thyroid just happens to be one of the really big ones. Rant over.
So in other words, stop stressing. Just chill out. Just
Yeah. If you can only do one thing,
ever.
yeah. They're like, cool. How do I do that?
It's like I love it when it's like, have you ever just tried not just being calm? Like, calm down. Just calm down. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, perfect. Like, thanks, tips. I had no idea. If only I think you've solved all my problems. I'm so glad you were there to tell me just to calm down.
Yeah.
Solved all my problems. Now it's done. So speaking of which, where do you like we've already talked about journaling and kind of some small like breathing techniques, meditation, but what else are there any other kind of tactics you have to help people kind of, because obviously chronic cortisol, very big problem, leads to a lot of problems in the body, just this one thing, just being overstressed, right? So obviously we have meditation, we have journaling, right? What other kind of tactics do you like to utilize, that other ways of helping people calm down to kind of maybe get control of that and come down to that more calm down state?
Yeah, there's some really basic things that we always start with. Getting outside in the morning is probably one of the most valuable things that you could do in your entire life to just regulate your entire body right off the bat. And like 5 minutes is fine, like 10 or 15 is probably a little bit better, but just getting natural light in your eyes life-changing, just so fundamental. If there's one thing you can do, like I would say go get light in your eyes first thing in the morning. Don't drink coffee on an empty stomach. Make sure you eat breakfast, and eat breakfast within about an hour and a half of waking up. Make sure it's higher in protein and fat. Carbs are fine too, but make sure you're prioritizing proteins and fats. And then you can have coffee, you can have caffeine, but don't have it until after you've had your breakfast. Taking a minute throughout the day to just like bring you back to a level, like literally set your timer for 1 minute and just breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth. That goes a really long way. Prioritize sleep, and have a sleep routine of some sort. Doesn't have to be crazy. Once again, like 5 or 10 minutes just to help prepare your body for sleep. All of that stuff goes a really long way. You know, certainly you can supplement to support sleep, especially cortisol issues. But it's rare that we focus more on cortisol than anything else, because these other tactics go such a long way. And we have to dig deeper, because the thing with cortisol levels is, yes, all of these lifestyle things go a really, really long way and are super important, super valuable. But if you also have chronic stress in your body from hormone imbalances, gut issues, thyroid dysfunction, toxin overload, all of these other things, it's going to be really hard for your body to calm down and get into a true parasympathetic, relaxed state. So it's really about doing all of these things together in my eyes, because they're all so important.
For sure. So I've got 4 things here that I wrote down during that long rant.
Yeah.
So one of them, you mentioned that when people are stressed, they tend to not just overeat, but eat very quickly. Which can, obviously can be tied to eating more, because you're not giving your brain enough time to tell you that you're full, right? Are you familiar with You Can't Screw This Up by Adam Bornstein? It came out like a month ago, so like it's a book that came out, and in it he was trying to get people to eat slower, and during the time he found out that people on average only take about 8 minutes per meal. A meal, like a full plate of food, takes 8 minutes or less. That was like the average that he found. And it's like, well, we know that the gut, a healthy gut, can take 20 minutes to tell the brain that it's being fed. So do you have any kind of like strategies that you like to use to try and get people to kind of eat a little bit slower to kind of maybe combat that?
Yeah. First thing is put away your liquids. It's really easy to like shove some food in your mouth, wash it down with water or some sort of other liquid, and that can help you eat really fast. And if you eliminate that liquid, you're going to probably have to chew a little bit more just by default to swallow. I also recommend taking a couple big deep breaths before you start eating. You can also take a big deep breath in between bites to help slow you down. Really fun one that's also pretty hard is eat with your opposite hand. It's
I've done that
awkward.
one.
Yeah, it's super awkward, but like there's just a lot more thinking that goes into it, and you're probably just going to do it slower. You can also set your fork down or whatever eating utensil you're using in between bites. So those are kind of like some of my favorites. I mean, you should chew like 30 or 40 times. No one wants to count that.
No.
Chew until the consistency of a smoothie if you can. That would be great. But yeah, I mean, those are some of the real easy ones, I think.
Cool. Yeah, well, because the digestion process like starts sometimes before you even put it in your mouth. Like just the smell secretes saliva, and so when you put it in your mouth, like that's where digestion starts. It's not just in your stomach. So if you're just like put it in your mouth and then try to slurp it down with like water to get it down faster, like you're missing such a crucial part of the digestion process. A lot of the times, just like when you're feeling gassing and bloating after a meal, a lot of it's just because you didn't actually properly chew your food, because now your stomach is working so much harder to break down the food, and it's not going to be able to extract all the nutrients, and you're having more solid chunks going through your digestive tract rather than it being broken down and absorbed properly. So it's like, yes, you're technically eating healthy foods. Even if you're eating super healthy foods, you're making it so hard on your body to break down and digest that you're not getting the nutrients that you think you're getting. And it's working so hard and to try and break it down. It's like, no, it's super uncomfy. Cool. And now I'm going to save. You mentioned PCOS, so I'm going to save that one for last because I know that one could be a long discussion. Uh, um, you mentioned breakfast.
Mhm.
So a lot of people will either do two things. They either skip breakfast altogether. I know like a lot of clients that I have, a lot of people in my community are always like, yeah, but I'm just not hungry in the morning. And so you don't want to eat anything. And so one, we know that that puts you way behind from like a protein standpoint. It's hard to get already. Women tend to already struggle getting enough protein in. Not making it any easier on yourself by skipping a meal where you can load up on protein. So it's like, obviously people should, you don't want them to stress over trying to eat a big meal first thing in the morning. So where do you get people to start eating breakfast?
Yeah. I'll also just say that not being hungry in the morning is often a sign of a cortisol dysregulation issue. It's just so people are super aware of that. It's, and in our practice, we don't do intermittent fasting. Like we're very, very few. I mean, I've maybe recommended it one time ever in my entire career. And it was for health reasons. It was not for weight loss reasons. And so that's a big reason. And people just drink the coffee and that dysregulates cortisol even more. And then we end up in this chronic circle. But yeah, where do people start? So, probably the easiest thing is bone broth. You get some protein in there. It's super easy. If people are really like have an adverse reaction or just like, I cannot put anything in my body, have a little bit of bone broth. You're getting a little bit of protein. You're getting some good nutrients. You're at least getting something in your body first thing. And it's easier because you can drink it and it's not thicker like a shaker or smoothie. Shaker or smoothie, also a great option. As long as you drink it slow, drink it over the course of an hour. As you're drinking it, mimic chewing a little bit. That'll help stimulate some of your digestive enzymes so that you're bringing it down. I know some people with digestive issues like really don't do well with smoothies, but that's a big part of the reason why. Yogurt, if you tolerate dairy, and you can load up yogurt, dairy or non-dairy, to be honest, with some protein powder, some good fruits or nuts or whatever it is. Obviously, if you can eat whole foods, even better. Eggs are great. For me, I don't do well with eggs, so I do a lot of like chicken sausage. That's basically like chicken and spices. Scramble like ground meat, sweet potatoes, veggies, super great option. But yeah, just like have a couple things that you can have in your rotation and go to on days that you're not quite as hungry. Maybe you do something like a shake or a smoothie. On days that you do have a little bit more time in the morning and you are feeling a little bit hungry, like do a scramble, do something. I'll also say like breakfast doesn't have to be breakfast. You can have anything for breakfast. You can have leftover dinner for breakfast. It doesn't really matter. And I just think there's this preconceived notion you have to have like breakfast food at breakfast, but breakfast can be anything you want.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the way we also know that like a lot of the times like ghrelin is very time dependent as well, right? If you go every single day not eating until 10, you're not going to be hungry until 10 because that's when your body recognizes that's when you can get regular feedings in. So even if we just kind of start early and just like get something, even if you just like you said, sipping on a protein shake, the bone broth, if you get like a small little cup of Greek yogurt, put a couple berries in it, super easy, quick and easy to eat. It's not like you're sitting down trying to get a big meal, but getting some form of nutrients in early in the day, eventually your ghrelin regulation will be like, okay, we're now able to get food earlier, so I'm going to make sure that they know it, and it triggers ghrelin to make you hungry again, right? So it's like that's kind of usually the way I went, but I really like that you also touched on cortisol because that's something I usually forget to talk about when it comes to hunger.
Huge. A lack of appetite, craving salt are two classic signs you have a cortisol dysregulation issue. If you're not a sweets person, if you just tend to go for like the chips, anything salty, and you have a pretty like low appetite, generally speaking, huge red flag for a cortisol dysregulation issue.
Cool. And then obviously we talk about sleep, how sleep and cortisol have this annoying brutal cycle where it's like if one doesn't get fixed then the other one also gets worse. You did mention sleep earlier, so it's like what are some ways where we can start kind of working on getting better sleep, getting better quality sleep?
Yeah, I think having some sort of way to wind down, that meditation, breath work, journaling practice, super, super great. Just at the end of your workday, even just taking a couple minutes to be like, okay, I'm done with my workday. Like this is it. You know, if you've got a family, like you put your children to bed, like take a second for yourself to be like, okay, the big stuff for my day is done. Like I'm gonna start preparing my body for sleep. And that really, really makes a difference. You know, and then classic things, you know, going dark at dark for the best of your ability, not looking at screens or wearing blue light blocking glasses, you know, not having big conversations or like listening or reading to anything super stimulating. You know, you know, for me, like nighttime is the only time I get with my husband during the week. So we usually watch an episode or two of like The Office or Modern Family or just something super light. We've seen it a bunch. It's just like we don't have to pay attention, and it's lighthearted. And so it's very, very non stimulating. But I'll also say, you know, people like to read. Don't read anything educational. Don't read anything crazy or intense. Like read like a trashy romance novel that you don't have to think about, like something like fantasy, just something that's not stimulating for you. That goes a really long way. Yeah, I mean, those are the big ones. And certainly like I think supplementation is a last resort, but it can be necessary for a little bit as you start to regulate your sleep. So I do see some value in a supplement to support as needed with that. Yeah.
Sleep is huge. I'm always
Oh
trying to
my
do
God.
everything I can. Like sleep is where like that's where there's so many times so much good stuff. Your body's almost just as active at rest as it is during the day. You're just not conscious for it. But like there's so much going on. Would you be able to dive into kind of like what is happening while you sleep? Like if that's something you could dive into a bit, because there's always that adage of like, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead. It's like drives me insane. But like, what's happening when we sleep? Like, why is it so important for hormonal regulation, gut health, stress, all that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say two big things. One, our body's repairing itself. You know, our organs go through like this repair process, especially if you look at like Ayurvedic medicine and we look at like the different time frames, like there's different organs that are being restored and regenerated and processing at different times. And this can also help us get some insight into some of the dysfunctions that can be going on. You know, someone's waking up between like 1 to 2:30, probably liver related, which is really, really, really common. And your liver probably needs a little bit of support. If you're waking up like 2:30 to 3:30, probably cortisol related. We probably want to address that. If it's just super restless like that, I mean, that can be a lot of things. But you know, I think just repairing our body is really repairing from the day, repairing our organs, processing out things, working on eliminating things, and like going through the whole like phases of detoxification to make sure like we're getting out things that shouldn't be in our body so we can release those throughout the day. But we're also, our subconscious is mentally and emotionally processing everything from the day. And if we think about chronic stress and trauma, well, that's huge. And if we're not giving our brain that time and space to process things from the day, we're probably going to carry those things on with us. We're probably going to remain in that stressed, trauma filled state. I mean, one of the biggest things that happens, and I certainly saw this with myself, but also certainly with all kinds of clients, is when we start to do deeper trauma work, our cortisol levels start to regulate and we get more tired for a little while. I mean, we'll need like 8.5, 9.5, 10 hours of sleep sometimes, maybe some naps, because your brain needs more time to process these emotions, these things, and get them out of your body. And you're finally being able to feel them. You're finally being able to process these things. And sleep is a really important part of that trauma healing process. So it's not uncommon to have that happen where you just get super tired because your brain just needs this extra time to process, and to really kind of work some of this stuff out and get it out of your brain, get it out of your body. So I mean, that's a huge piece of the chronic stress puzzle too.
Cool. Oh man, I love this. Cool. So like the last thing, because I know this can be kind of a little bit of a rabbit hole for some. And I but you mentioned PCOS. I know that's a really big thing and relatively unknown, underdiagnosed, ignored, misinformed. There's a lot of things that kind of go around where just like a lot of people like I don't remember the statistics, so I'm not going to throw it out there, but there's a ton of women that have developed PCOS and they don't even know it because their doctors don't even know what to look for or what the symptoms are. A lot of doctors people don't even realize that there's actually 4 types of it, right? And so the only one that I always remember off the top of my head is insulin resistance. I know that's one of the 4. I always forget the name, forget what the other ones are, but if you don't mind kind of like going into it, what that might look like, what that might be feeling like, and then maybe how we can kind of better manage the symptoms, like if that's something that you're experienced with, that'd be awesome
Yeah.
if we can go into that.
Yeah, so it can look and feel like a lot of things, and it is really hard to diagnose. There are a lot of types of PCOS. And so what I will really talk about is we'll say hormone imbalances with an emphasis on androgen and or testosterone dominance, which often leads to blood sugar dysregulation issues, which can look like a lot of things here. And this, if your cycles are really painful, super common. Now, PCOS is certainly not the only thing where this can happen, but if you have really painful cycles, like you have to take medication for it. I mean, you just like you're bedridden, you're exhausted, mood fluctuations. I mean, crazy mood fluctuations. This is a classic sign of hormone imbalances. Breast tenderness is a big one. This is more often related to estrogen dominance, although I've certainly seen my fair share of PCOS cases where this is also a thing. I mean, if you're going through whatever products you're using on your period, I mean, like every hour, every couple hours, and it's like super, super heavy. Clotting is a really big one. Clotting is often more associated with a thyroid dysfunction as well, which isn't uncommon with PCOS either. So irregular cycles, super short cycles. If your periods, comes like every 18 to 22 days, that's not normal. Or if it's coming like every 45 to 60 days, that is also not normal, and can be associated with PCOS. The blood sugar piece, certainly blood sugar dysregulation issues, insulin resistance, whatever you want to call it, can be related to a lot of things. But if you have to eat like every 3 hours, this is a classic sign. If you go too long without eating and you get really dizzy and lightheaded, if you stand up quickly after not eating for a couple hours and you're really dizzy and lightheaded, or you get like the black dots, that can be a sign. If you get headaches if you wait too long to eat, this is a classic sign. Sudden dips in energy, or sudden spikes in energy, this is a classic blood sugar dysregulation issues, which is very, very, very common with PCOS, which is one of the reasons why the breakfast piece and getting the protein and getting the fat at breakfast within about an hour, hour and a half of waking up is so important, because not only does that regulate your blood sugar right off the bat, but that also sets you up for the rest of your day. And if you miss this piece, the chances of you having blood sugar dysregulation issues for the rest of the day, it goes up astronomically. Now, once again, when we think about like big root causes of PCOS, so chronic stress certainly plays a big role here. And so does chronic stress and blood sugar dysregulation issues. Blood sugar is largely controlled by the liver. It is not the only thing, but the liver plays a really big role here. Once again, if the liver is doing all kinds of other stuff and just like doesn't have the capacity to help you regulate your blood sugar, well, we're probably going to end up with some sort of dysfunction and or issue. So that plays a really big role. Now, with most classic PCOS, we have excess hormones, testosterone, androgens of some sort, which also goes back to the liver because we're not filtering that stuff out. Signs of excess androgens or testosterone, if you're a woman and you get facial hair or little black hairs, and this could be on your face, but this could also be on your breasts, on your belly, on other parts of your body where you wouldn't normally have the like dark coarse hair, that's often a very common sign as well. But when we think about PCOS, we have to understand, like, well, why are hormones here? When we think about hormones, the biggest thing is what's playing a role here. And there's a lot of things that can play a role. Certainly nutrition plays a really big role. And if we have chronic inflammation, just a little bit. If we have all of these other issues, chronic stress plays a role here. But I'll also say big things that I see, and this could be like just in our practice, but I talk to too many women to believe this, that toxin overload issues play a huge role. Parasite overload plays a huge, huge role because this is going to increase the chronic stress. This is going to just impact your liver's ability to filter out excess hormones. Parasites alone impact hormones and cause lots of dysregulation issues within the hormones. And so we have to look at everything together. We have to look at nutrition. We have to look at movement. If you have PCOS, please do not go do HIIT workouts. Please do not go do like vinyasa hot yoga every day, like on an empty stomach. Like, not going to be great for you. Don't go run a marathon, please. Like, take a break for a little bit. Strength training movement is definitely good, but it needs to be appropriate for you and your body at that time. Lifestyle plays a really big role, especially with the blood sugar dysregulation. But then we also want to look at, well, why? Like, why did you end up here? Like, what's going wrong in the body that is contributing to this? And like I said, toxin overload issues play a really, really big role. If you have heavy metal toxicity, if you have mold toxicity, if you live in a really big city like New York City and you're exposed to a whole bunch of toxins, plus you have chronic stress all the time, I mean, gosh, you're probably going to end up with a toxin overload issue, and you're probably going to end up with some hormone dysregulation issues. So those are some of like the really big things, but I always recommend start with the basics: water, nutrition, lifestyle, movement. But we also do, I think there's a lot of value in looking at the bigger picture and looking at some of these other things, because you can have everything else perfect and that'll help, but you may not see the biggest change until you address some of these bigger issues going on.
You mentioned kind of, again, going back to the breakfast thing. So this kind of maybe even like, oh right, I remember this as well. Um with the blood sugar regulation and energy levels kind of dipping and going up and down throughout the day. Um, the amount of people that I've met helped with like just avoid the afternoon crash just by adding a high protein with fat breakfast, huge.
Huge.
Also, coffee first thing in the morning. A lot of the times, like those two things, skipping breakfast and having coffee first thing in the morning, are basically the reason why you're having such a drastic dip in the afternoon in energy, and be like, I need to nap or die.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's yeah, it's crazy how just kind of adding that as well. And also a lot of the times when people have these kind of like nighttime snack cravings, a lot of it's just because you're just too hungry, or you're underfed, like you're lacking nutrients, and or you're just super hungry and your brain's like, feed me now, I don't care what it is, just get it in me.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's
mean, and cortisol and blood sugar regulation go hand in hand.
oh, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome.
Yeah.
There was so much here. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make sure to actually take notes this time, because because while you were starting to go through your rant, I was like, oh, there's so many things I want to touch on, but I will forget them. So I had to like
Yeah.
go over, grab some notepads, and start writing things down so I can remember to come back to them. So like, thank you so much. There was so much awesome information in here. Um, Incredible. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to chat with you.
All right. So where can other people find you if they want to learn more about this kind of thing?
Yeah, so I am at Trifecta Collective, pretty across the board. We have a Facebook group, and then we're on Instagram and TikTok. It's mostly my face, but we have other people in the practice as well. But we have tons and tons of free resources. My website is trifectacollective.net as well, and we've got tons of free resources there as well.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Have yourself a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Take care.